Princess Gia stood at the large window of the royal palace, looking at the 3 moons of her home world. Her long black hair was pulled back in a simple style. Her blue skin glowed softly in the moonlight. She felt calm for what might be the last time. A soft knock on her door broke the silence. "Enter," she said, not turning from the window. Hyun, her personal guard and oldest friend, stepped into the room. His face was serious. "The Emperor requests your presence in the throne room, Princess." Gia sighed. Her father rarely called for her these days. When he did, it was never good news. "Did he say why?" she asked. "No, Princess, but there are visitors from Earth in the palace today." Gia raised an eyebrow. Humans were strange creatures. Pink-skinned, too many teeth, and always sweating. Their planet was a distant ally, but not one her people dealt with often. "Very well," she said, straightening her formal robes. "Let's not keep him waiting." The walk to the throne room was long. Servants bowed as she passed. Some looked at her with pity in their eyes. Strange, Gia thought. What did they know that she didn't? The massive doors to the throne room opened. Emperor Ta sat on his crystal throne, looking older than his 300 years. Beside him stood 3 humans in stiff military uniforms. Their skin ranged from light brown to dark pink. They looked uncomfortable in the higher gravity of the Dominion world. "Daughter," Emperor Ta said, his voice echoing in the large room. "Come forward." Gia walked to the foot of the throne and bowed slightly. "Father, you called for me." "Yes." Emperor Ta's face showed no emotion. "I have news. The Void Scourge grows stronger at our borders. Our defenses weaken each day." "I've read the reports," Gia said. As heir to the throne, she kept up with all threats to their people. "Then you understand we need stronger allies." The Emperor gestured to the humans. "Earth has offered their most advanced weapons and ships to help us fight." Gia nodded. "That is good news." "In exchange," her father continued, "they ask for something valuable from us." A cold feeling grew in Gia's stomach. "What do they want?" "You, daughter. A marriage to seal our alliance." The room seemed to spin around her. Marriage. To a human. To Commander Lee of Earth's United Forces. Emperor Ta pointed to the tallest human, who stepped forward and bowed. The human had short black hair and serious eyes. He looked as unhappy as Gia felt. "This is not a request," the Emperor said flatly. "It is decided. You will marry in 1 month. Then you will return with Commander Lee to Earth as a symbol of our new alliance." Gia's hands tightened into fists. "Father, I am your heir. My place is here, learning to rule the Dominion. Your brother Dad will become my heir now." "Die." Gia couldn't believe what she was hearing. "He cares nothing for our people. He spends all his time racing ships and collecting art." "Enough." The Emperor's voice boomed. "The decision is made. Our civilization's survival depends on this alliance." Gia looked at the human, Commander Lee. He stood straight, eyes forward, face showing nothing. Was he happy about this? Did humans even feel things the way her people did? "You have sold me," Gia said quietly to her father, "like trading a ship or a weapon." The Emperor's face hardened. "I have secured our future. You will do your duty, as I have done mine." Gia wanted to scream, to throw something, to run. But years of royal training kept her standing tall. She would not show weakness in front of these humans. "As you command, Father," she said, her voice like ice. "If you'll excuse me, I must prepare for my wedding." She turned and walked out, back straight, head high. Only when the doors closed behind her did she let a single tear fall. Her own father had sold her to aliens. Now she had 1 month to find a way out, or accept a life among strange pink creatures on a distant world. The royal ship moved through space, stars streaking past the large viewing window. Princess Gia sat alone in her private chamber, studying a tablet with information about Earth. The ship would reach the human planet in 2 more days. Gravity 1.2 times stronger than home, she read aloud. Air thicker, more oxygen. She sighed and put down the tablet. No matter how much she read, Earth still sounded terrible. The door slid open, and Hyun entered. Unlike most of the royal guards who had stayed behind, Hyun had insisted on coming with her. "Princess, you should eat something," he said, placing a tray of food on her table. Jia ignored the food. "Have you found any way to disable the escape pods without setting off alarms?" Hyun frowned. "Princess, we've been over this. Even if we escaped, where would we go? The Dominion controls most worlds in this sector, and your father would find us." "We could go beyond Dominion space," Jia said, but her voice lacked conviction. "To die among strangers." Hyun shook his head. "And what of the Void Scourge? Your father wasn't lying about that threat." Jia stood and paced the room. "So I should just accept being traded away? Marry a human who probably thinks I'm some kind of blue monster?" "Commander Lee didn't seem to think that," Hyun said carefully. "How would you know what a human thinks?" Jia snapped. "I wouldn't," Hyun admitted, "but he looked as trapped as you did." Jia paused, remembering the tall human's stiff posture and carefully blank face. Maybe Hyun was right. Maybe Commander Lee hadn't chosen this either. The ship's speaker system chimed. "Approaching Earth system. All royal staff prepare for arrival procedures." "So soon?" Jia felt her heart beat faster. They said 2 more days. "The new engines are faster than expected," Hyun said. "Princess, you should change into your formal robes." Jia looked out the window as a blue-green planet came into view. Earth. It looked so small, so wet. The landing pad was crowded with humans in different uniforms. Some held devices that Jia recognized as primitive recording tools. Her father had insisted on making this a public event, the great alliance between Earth and the Dominion. As she stepped out of the ship, Jia felt the difference immediately. The gravity pulled at her more strongly than at home. The air felt thick in her lungs, almost too rich. And the smell, so many strange, strong smells. At the bottom of the ramp stood Commander Lee, flanked by other humans in similar uniforms. He stepped forward and bowed in the Dominion style, surprising Jia. "Princess Jia," he said, his voice deeper than she remembered. "Welcome to Earth." Jia gave the slightest bow in return. "Commander Lee." An awkward silence followed. The humans watching seemed to expect something more. "The transport is ready to take you to your new residence," Lee said finally, "unless you would prefer to rest after your journey." "I am not tired," Jia lied. In truth, the heavy gravity was already making her legs ache. Lee nodded and gestured toward a large black vehicle. "This way, then." As they walked, Jia noticed Lee slowing his pace to match hers, a small kindness, but unexpected. The vehicle moved through streets filled with strange buildings and even stranger people. Humans of all colors and sizes stared as they passed. Some waved. Some took pictures. Jia kept her face neutral, though inside she felt like a creature in a zoo. "Your world is very bright," she said, breaking the silence. "Our sun is closer than your home systems," Lee replied. "You'll get used to it. The windows in your quarters have adjustable tinting." Jia looked at him with surprise. "You prepared special quarters." "We've tried to make accommodations for your comfort," Lee said. "I can't promise it will feel like home, but—" "Nothing here will feel like home," Jia said sharply. Lee fell silent for a moment, then spoke softly. "No, I don't suppose it will." Something in his tone made Jia look at him more closely. His face showed understanding, not pity or annoyance. "We're both following orders, Princess," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "I hope we can make the best of it." Jia didn't reply, but as the vehicle continued toward her new prison, she wondered if perhaps Commander Lee might be an ally rather than just another jailer. Jia looked around Commander Lee's home with poorly hidden surprise. She had expected a grand house fitting a high military leader. Instead, the building was modest. a single-level structure with simple furniture and few decorations. "This is all of it?" she asked, standing in the main room. Lee nodded. "This is my home. I know it's not what you're used to." "Where are the servants?" Jia asked, looking around for staff. "There are none," Lee said. "Most humans don't have servants in their homes. I clean and cook for myself." Jia couldn't hide her shock. "You, a military commander, doing servant work?" "It's not servant work here," Lee explained patiently. "It's just living." Jia walked to the window, looking out at the strange trees and plants. Everything on Earth seemed so different. Even the colors were wrong. The plants were too green, the sky too blue. "Your room is this way," Lee said, carrying her bags down a short hallway. "I had it prepared according to the guidelines your father's staff provided." The bedroom was small but had a large bed with blue covers that matched the color of her skin. The lights were dimmer, closer to the lighting on her home world. A water filter sat on a small table. Humans drank different water than her people. "The bathroom connects through there." Lee pointed to a door. "I've been told the water temperature and pressure should be suitable for you." Jia nodded, surprised at these thoughtful details. "Thank you," she said stiffly. Lee stood awkwardly in the doorway. "I'll let you rest. We have a meeting at the Earth Defense Council tomorrow. They want to discuss the alliance details." After he left, Jia sat on the bed. She pulled out a small device and scanned the room for listening devices. Finding none, she relaxed slightly. The next morning, Jia woke to strange sounds and smells. Following them, she found Lee in the kitchen area, cooking something that sizzled in a pan. "Good morning," he said, looking up. "I wasn't sure what you eat for breakfast. Your father's information was limited." "We eat morning meal, not breakfast," Jia said. "And we don't cook with fire inside the home." Lee looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I can prepare something else." Jia shook her head. "No, I should try human food if I am to live here." The meal was strange. Flat bread with sweet liquid and small fruits. Jia found the taste not unpleasant, though very different from home. As they ate, Jia studied Lee. "Why did you agree to this marriage? Surely a commander could choose his own wife." Lee put down his fork. "I follow orders, just as you do. Earth needs this alliance as much as your people do." "Because of the Void Scourge?" Jia asked. Lee nodded. "They've attacked 3 of our outer colonies. Your father's scientists understand them better than ours do." "So you were forced into this too," Jia said, feeling slightly better knowing Lee had no more choice than she did. "Yes," Lee admitted. "Though I would not use the word forced. I volunteered when they needed someone." "You volunteered to marry an alien." Jia couldn't hide her surprise. "I volunteered to do what was needed for my people," Lee said simply. "Just as you are doing." Jia looked away. "I did not volunteer. I was sold." Lee was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry. That wasn't right." A beeping sound came from Lee's wrist device. He checked it and stood up. "We need to leave soon. The council doesn't like to be kept waiting." As they prepared to leave, Jia's communication device flashed with an urgent message from home. She read it quickly, her blue face turning a shade paler. "What is it?" Lee asked, noticing her expression. "The Void Scourge," Jia said quietly. "They've attacked another Dominion colony. Over 10,000 dead." Lee's face grew serious. "I'm sorry." Jia looked at him, truly seeing him for the first time. "Perhaps my father was right about one thing. We do need this alliance." Lee nodded grimly. "Yes, we do." As they left for the council meeting, something had changed between them. Not friendship, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. The Earth Defense Council building was tall and made of glass. Leaders from all Earth nations gathered there to discuss the alliance with the Dominion. Jia stood beside Commander Lee, listening to humans talk about weapons, ships, and defense plans. "The Dominion biotechnology will help us strengthen our soldiers," said one woman in a white uniform. And their knowledge of the Void Scourge is vital, added an older man. Jia listened carefully. Something felt wrong about the way they spoke. They seemed more interested in Dominion technology than in fighting the Scourge. During a break, Jia walked around the large meeting room. In a quiet corner, she overheard two men talking. Emperor Ta was quite eager for this deal, one said quietly. Of course he was, the other replied. The biotech we're giving him will extend his life by centuries. He'd trade 10 daughters for that. Jia froze. Extend his life. Was that what this was about? She returned to Li's side, saying nothing. But inside, her mind was racing. That night, while Li slept, Jia crept into his home office. She needed to know the truth. Using skills she had learned as the Dominion heir, she bypassed the security on Li's computer terminal. Her fingers moved quickly over the strange keyboard, searching for information. Finally, she found a folder marked Dominion Alliance, classified. Inside were documents that made her blue skin turn icy cold. Project Immortal Emperor, one document was titled. It described advanced human biotechnology that could extend a person's life far beyond normal years. It was being traded to Emperor Ta in exchange for Dominion defense technology and a royal marriage to seal the deal. Another document showed reports about the Void Scourge. They were a real threat, but the attacks had been much smaller than her father had claimed. He had made the danger seem worse to justify the alliance and her marriage. Find what you were looking for. Jia jumped. Commander Li stood in the doorway, his face hard to read in the dim light. You knew, she said, her voice shaking with anger. You knew my father sold me for technology to make himself live longer. Li stepped into the room. I knew there was more to the alliance than we were told. I didn't know the details until recently. And you said nothing. Jia stood up, fists clenched. You let me believe this was all about saving our people. The Void Scourge is real, Li said firmly. That part is true. But yes, there are other motives at work. Jia felt tears threatening to form, but held them back. My father doesn't care about me at all. I'm just a trade item. Li was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I'm sorry. If it helps, my leaders aren't much better. They want the Dominion technology at any cost. Why tell me this now? Jia asked. Why not keep lying? Because I believe in honesty between. Li paused, searching for the right word. Between what? Husband and wife. Jia laughed bitterly. We are not married yet, Commander. Between allies, Li finished. If we're going to survive what's coming, we need to trust each other. Jia looked back at the computer screen. My father betrayed me. Your leaders are using us both. Who can I trust now? Li stepped closer. Trust me, he said simply. I'm as trapped in this as you are. But maybe together, we can find a way forward that doesn't just serve our selfish leaders. Jia studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. Finding none, she nodded slowly. Very well, Commander. Let's be allies in truth, not just for show. She held out her hand in the human way. Li took her hand carefully. His skin felt warm against her cooler blue skin. Call me Sung, he said. If we're going to be allies, you should use my first name. Sung, Jia repeated, testing the name. And I am just Jia. Not princess, not your highness. Just Jia. It was a small thing, but it felt like the beginning of something real in a world of lies. Over the next week, Jia and Sung worked together to learn more about the secret plans of their leaders. During the day, they attended official meetings and acted like the perfect diplomatic couple. At night, they searched through files and made plans of their own. My father will contact me soon, Jia said as they sat in Sung's living room. He always wants reports on how the alliance is progressing. Sung nodded. What will you tell him? What he wants to hear, Jia said with a small smile. That everything is going as planned. A loud alarm suddenly blared from Sung's communication device. He grabbed it quickly, his face growing serious as he read the message. The lunar colony is under attack, he said, standing up. The Void Scourge has broken through the outer defenses. Jia stood too. How bad? Bad enough that I'm being called in, Sung said, already moving toward his bedroom to change into his uniform. You should stay here where it's safe. I'm coming with you, Jia said firmly. I know more about the Scourge than your scientists do. Sung looked like he wanted to argue but nodded instead. Be ready in 5 minutes. The Earth Defense Headquarters was filled with people running in different directions. Screens on the walls showed the moon colony under attack. Strange black ships with purple energy beams were destroying buildings and defense stations. Commander Lee, we need your input on the counterattack, said a woman in a general's uniform. Sung stepped forward to look at the battle maps. Jia followed, studying the enemy positions. Their formation is wrong, she said quietly to Sung. What do you mean? He asked. The Scourge always attacks in spiral patterns, Jia explained. These ships are attacking in straight lines. It's not their usual strategy. Sung turned to the general. We need to change our approach. Princess Jia has information about their tactics. The general looked doubtful, but motioned for Jia to speak. Taking a deep breath, Jia stepped forward. She pointed to the map and explained how the Scourge normally fought and why this attack was different. If you send your ships here and here, she said, pointing to specific spots, you can surprise them. They won't expect it. The general looked at Sung, who nodded confidently. Do as she suggests. Within an hour, Earth's forces had pushed back the Scourge ships using Jia's strategy. The lunar colony was saved, though some parts were heavily damaged. You were right, Sung said as they watched the enemy ships retreat. How did you know so much about their battle tactics? I was trained to be Empress, Jia said simply. Military strategy was part of my education. Sung looked impressed. You would have made a good leader. I still might, Jia said, just not where my father expected. The next day, Earth's leaders wanted to meet with Jia. The room was filled with important people from different nations, all wanting to thank her for saving the lunar colony. Jia spoke carefully, using simple human terms to explain what she knew about the Void Scourge. Sung stood nearby, adding information when needed. They worked well together, Jia realized, like a real team. After the meeting, one leader pulled Sung aside. Jia couldn't hear what they said, but Sung's face showed anger before he controlled his expression. What did he want? Jia asked when they were alone. He suggested that I encourage you to share more Dominion military secrets, Sung said, his voice tight. As if I would use our relationship to trick you. Jia felt strangely touched by his anger. You wouldn't? No, Sung said firmly. What we have, whatever this is becoming, it's not a tool for politics. At least not for me. Jia looked at this human who was supposed to be her enemy, her jailer, her unwanted husband. Instead, he had become something else, something unexpected. Not for me either, she said softly. 2 days after the lunar colony attack, Jia woke to the sound of multiple alarms. Sung was already up, talking urgently into his communication device. What's happening? Jia asked, her voice still heavy with sleep. Massive attacks, Sung said, his face grim. Not just on Earth colonies this time. The Dominion is under attack too. Jia felt her heart race. Where in the Dominion? The outer planets first. Now they're moving toward the central worlds. Sung handed her a tablet showing attack locations. It's not normal Scourge behavior. These attacks are too organized, too planned. Jia studied the map, her blue face growing pale. They're attacking key defense points. Someone is guiding them. That's impossible, Sung said. The Scourge is a natural space phenomenon. Deadly energy that moves through space. It can't be controlled. Then maybe it's not the Scourge at all, Jia said quietly. Maybe it's something else using the Scourge as cover. Before Sung could respond, his commander called. They were needed at headquarters immediately. Earth Defense Headquarters was in chaos. Reports of attacks came in from all directions. Both Earth and Dominion forces were being hit hard. "We've lost contact with 3 more outposts," reported a young officer, "and the Dominion Royal Fleet is under heavy attack." Jia tried to contact her home world but couldn't get through. Her hand shook slightly as she put down the communication device. Sung touched her arm gently. "We'll figure this out." A general called them to a private room where scientists were studying data from the attacks. "We found something strange," said one scientist, showing them a screen with energy readings. "The Scourge ships are giving off 2 types of energy. One is the normal Scourge energy we've seen before, but underneath that is another signal. Can you isolate it?" Sung asked. The scientist nodded and adjusted some controls. A pattern appeared on the screen. Jia gasped. "I've seen that before. It's a Krex communication signal." Everyone turned to look at her. "The who?" asked the general. "The Krex," Jia explained. "A species from beyond the outer rim. My people fought them centuries ago. We thought they were gone." "Apparently not," Sung said, studying the signal. "They must be controlling the Scourge somehow, using it as a weapon." An alarm sounded, and a voice came over the speakers. "Enemy ships approaching Earth's atmosphere. All defense teams to positions." Sung grabbed his weapon. "I need to join my squadron." "I'm coming too," Jia said, picking up a Dominion energy weapon she had brought from home. Sung looked like he might argue but nodded instead. "Stay close to me." The battle was intense. Scourge ships filled the sky, their purple energy beams cutting through Earth's defenses. Sung led a team of fighters on the ground, trying to protect the main defense center. Jia fought alongside him, her blue skin glowing with sweat as she fired her weapon at the enemy ships. She had never been in real combat before, but her training came back to her easily. "Behind you," she shouted to Sung as a small Scourge craft swooped down toward him. Sung turned and fired, but not quickly enough. The ship's beam grazed his shoulder, sending him to the ground. Without thinking, Jia leaped forward. Placing herself between Sung and the approaching ship, she fired her weapon directly at the ship's center, hitting a weak point she had learned about in her studies. The ship exploded in a burst of purple and black energy. Jia knelt beside Sung. "Are you hurt?" "Not badly," he said, though his face was tight with pain. "Why did you do that?" "You could have been killed." Jia helped him to his feet. "Same reason you would have done it for me." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. But there was no time for more as another wave of ships appeared. "We need to get to the command center," Sung said. "If the Krex are really behind this, we need a new strategy." As they ran for cover, Jia realized something had changed. She was no longer fighting just for duty or survival. She was fighting for someone she cared about, a human she had never expected to matter to her. After 3 days of fighting, Earth's forces pushed back the attack. Sung's shoulder was healing, and Jia had spent every moment gathering information about the Krex. They needed proof to show both their leaders. "I found enough evidence," Jia said, holding up a data drive. "The signal patterns match old Dominion records of Krex technology. They're definitely controlling the Scourge." Sung nodded, looking at the battle maps on his screen. "The attacks on Earth have stopped for now, but your home world is still under heavy fire." Jia's face showed worry. Despite her anger at her father, she still cared about her people. "We need to go there," she said firmly. "We need to warn them about the Krex." "Your father won't listen to me," Sung pointed out. "I'm just a human commander." "He'll listen to us together," Jia said. "We have proof now, and I'm still his daughter." After getting permission from Earth's leaders, they boarded a fast ship headed for the Dominion capital world. Hyun met them at the landing pad, his face showing surprise at seeing Jia and Sung arrive together. "Princess, the palace is in chaos," Hyun said as they walked quickly through the streets. "The attacks have everyone scared. And there are rumors." "What rumors?" Jia asked. "That some of the noble families are working against the Emperor. They never wanted the alliance with Earth." Jia and Sung exchanged worried looks. This was worse than they had thought. Emperor Tai sat on his crystal throne, looking older than when Jia had left. His eyes widened slightly when he saw her enter with Sung at her side. "Daughter," he said, his voice tired, "you've returned." "Father," Jia bowed slightly, "we bring important news about the attacks." The Emperor waved his hand. "We know about the Void Scourge. Our defenses are holding." "It's not just the Scourge," Jia said, stepping forward. "It's the Kreks. They're back, and they're using the Scourge as a weapon." The Emperor's face paled. "That's impossible. The Kreks were defeated centuries ago." "They've returned," Sung said, presenting the data they had collected. "And they're targeting both our worlds." Before the Emperor could respond, a loud explosion shook the palace. Guards ran in, weapons ready. "We're under attack," one shouted. From inside the city, Sun grabbed Jia's arm. "This isn't the Scourge. This is something else." Hyun rushed in, bleeding from a cut on his face. "Princess, Commander, some of the noble houses have started fighting. They're saying the Emperor betrayed the Dominion by allying with humans." "A civil war," Jia whispered, horrified, "while we're already under attack from the Kreks." The Emperor stood, his face angry. "Who leads this rebellion?" "Lord Quan," Hyun answered. "He claims you care more about extending your life than protecting our people." Jia looked at her father. "Is he wrong?" The Emperor couldn't meet her eyes. Another explosion rocked the building, closer this time. "We need to move," Sung said, his military training taking over. "This room is too exposed." He turned to Hyun. "Is there a secure command center?" Hyun nodded. "Below the palace." "I can take you there." As they hurried through the palace halls, more explosions sounded. Sung stayed close to Jia, his weapon ready. The Emperor followed, surrounded by royal guards. They reached a heavy door that led underground. As Hyun worked to open it, a group of armed nobles appeared at the end of the hallway. "There they are," one shouted. "The Emperor and his human pet." Shots rang out. Sung pushed Jia behind him, returning fire with his earth weapon. The royal guards formed a line of defense, but two fell quickly. "Get inside," Hyun shouted as the door opened. They rushed through the door, but as it began to close, Jia saw something that made her blood freeze. A small device landed near them, blinking rapidly. "Bomb!" she screamed, shoving Sung forward with all her strength. The explosion threw them into the command center. When the smoke cleared, Jia saw her father lying on the floor, bleeding badly, and Sung was slumped against the wall, not moving. For the first time since coming to Earth, Jia felt true fear. Jia moved quickly to Sung's side, checking for signs of life. Relief washed over her when she felt his pulse, steady but weak. He was alive, but knocked out from the blast. "Get the medical kit," she ordered, and a guard rushed to obey. Across the room, other guards were helping the Emperor. His blue skin was pale, almost white with blood loss. When Jia looked at him, she felt conflicted, anger for what he had done to her, but worry for the father she had once loved. Hyun secured the door and checked the room's systems. "Communications are still working. We can contact loyal forces." Jia nodded. "Do it. And try to reach Earth Command. They need to know what's happening here." As Hyun worked, Jia used the medical kit to treat Sung's wounds. His eyes fluttered open as she wrapped a bandage around his head. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice weak but concerned. Jia almost laughed. Even injured, he worried about her first. "I'm fine. You protected me." Sung tried to sit up. "Your father, alive, but hurt badly," Jia said. She helped Sung to a chair near the command console where they could see the situation outside. On the screens, the capital city was in chaos. Fighting between loyal forces and rebels filled the streets. Above the planet, the Dominion fleet battled what looked like Void Scourge ships, but now they knew the Kreks controlled them. "This is exactly what the Kreks wanted," Sung said, watching the screens. "To divide us and make us fight each other. We need to end this civil war and focus on the real enemy. Jia agreed. The emperor called weakly from his bed. Jia, come here. She went to him, Sung following slowly behind her. You are right, the emperor said, his voice barely above a whisper. About everything. The Kreks, and about me. I was selfish. We don't have time for this, father, Jia said firmly. We need to stop the fighting and unite our forces. The nobles won't listen to me anymore, he said, but they might listen to you. Jia shook her head. Why would they? I married a human. Because you are the true heir, the emperor said. And because you were right when I was wrong. He coughed, blood appearing on his lips. I declare you empress now. Before these witnesses, the guards in the room knelt immediately. Even Hyun, who rarely showed such formal respect, bent his knee. Empress Jia, they said together. Jia felt frozen in place. This was what she had been raised for, but not how she had imagined it happening. I can't take the throne now. Not in the middle of all this. You must, the emperor insisted. It's the only way to save our people. Sung placed a hand on her shoulder. He's right. You can unite them. Jia looked at Sung, seeing the confidence in his eyes. Will you stand with me? Even though this is not what you signed up for. I'll stand with you, Sung said simply. Whatever comes next. With new determination, Jia turned to Hyun. Open a channel to all Dominion frequencies, military and civilian. When Hyun nodded that it was ready, Jia stood straight and spoke in a clear, strong voice. People of the Dominion, this is Princess, Empress Jia. Our world faces two enemies today. The Kreks have returned, using the Void Scourge as their weapon, and we fight among ourselves, doing the enemy's work for them. She paused, looking at Sung, who nodded encouragingly. I stand before you with Commander Sungli of Earth at my side. Our worlds must unite to survive. I call on all noble houses to cease fighting immediately. Lord Quan and his supporters will not be punished if they join us against the true enemy now. On the screens, they could see people stopping to listen, soldiers lowering their weapons. My father sought an alliance with humans for his own gain, Jia continued honestly. But I stand with humans because it is right. Because together, we are stronger than the Kreks. Together, we can survive. She reached out and took Sung's hand, not caring who saw. This is not about politics anymore. This is about our future, all of our futures. As she finished speaking, they watched the screens nervously, waiting to see if her words would make a difference. For several long minutes after Jia's speech, nothing seemed to change on the screens. Then, slowly, the fighting in the streets began to stop. Soldiers lowered their weapons. Citizens looked up at the sky, where the battle against the Kreks-controlled ships continued. Jia's communication device beeped. Lord Quan was calling. Empress, he said, his face stern but respectful. I heard your words. Is it true? The Kreks have returned. It is true, Jia said firmly. See for yourself. She sent him the data she and Sung had gathered. After reviewing it, Lord Quan's face changed. I fought against your father's alliance with humans because I believed he betrayed our ways. But this, he paused. The Kreks are the ancient enemy of all our people. Then fight them with us, Jia said. Your ships are needed in orbit. Lord Quan bowed his head. My forces are yours, Empress. Within an hour, the civil conflict had ended. All Dominion ships joined together against the Kreks fleet. Earth forces, warned by Hyun's message, arrived to help as well. Sung worked with Dominion commanders, sharing Earth battle tactics. Jia coordinated from the command center, her father watching weakly from his medical bed. You were born for this, the Emperor said softly. A better ruler than I ever was. Jia didn't answer. There would be time later to deal with her feelings about her father's betrayal. Now, her people needed her. The battle raged for 2 days. The combined Earth and Dominion forces slowly gained ground against the Kreks ships. On the 3rd day, they found the main Kreks command vessel and destroyed it, Without central control, the void scourge returned to its natural pattern, drifting away from populated areas. 1 month later, Gia stood in the great hall of the palace. Her room was filled with both Dominion nobles and Earth officials. Her father had survived his injuries but was too weak to rule. He sat to the side, watching as Gia prepared to be officially crowned empress. Sung stood near her, dressed in a formal Earth military uniform modified with Dominion colors. Their relationship had grown stronger through the crisis. What had started as a forced arrangement had become something real and powerful. Before the ceremony began, Gia raised her hand for silence. "Today marks a new beginning for the Dominion," she said, her voice carrying through the hall. "We will no longer be ruled by one person with absolute power. From now on, we will have a council of representatives from all worlds and colonies. The throne will remain, but its power will be shared." Murmurs filled the room. Some nobles looked unhappy, but many nodded in agreement. The recent civil conflict had shown the dangers of absolute rule. "As my first act as empress," Gia continued, "I renew our alliance with Earth, not for personal gain, but for the strength and safety of both our peoples." She turned to Sung, who stepped forward to stand beside her. "Commander Lee and I were forced together by others' plans," she said, "but we choose to stay together by our own will." Sung took her hand, a small smile on his face. "We found something neither of us expected," he said. The Earth officials applauded. Even some of the Dominion nobles, who had once looked down on humans, seemed to approve. After the ceremony, Gia and Sung walked together in the palace gardens. The sky above was clear of ships in battle. "Did you ever imagine this?" Gia asked, looking at the peace around them. "When we first met?" Sung shook his head. "Never. I thought we would be trapped in a political marriage, pretending for the rest of our lives." "And now?" she asked. "Now we build something new," he said. "Together." Gia looked back at the palace where her father had once sold her future for his own gain. That betrayal had led her here, to a place she never expected, to leadership, to purpose, and to someone who saw her as an equal, not a tool. "Together," she agreed, her blue fingers intertwined with his human ones. "Not forced anymore, but chosen."